Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and today we have an eventful day in 1915. Okay, so our recap for 1935, the previous video, we had Dmitri emphasizing the need for sacrificial service to the cause of the sovereign emperor, meaning Kirill, and saying, well, we've succeeded in gaining the emperor's trust, and now we need to gain the trust of the Russian people in Russia. He doesn't suggest how they could go about that. And also, that they're pretty much just being harassed and hectored by the right wing of the immigration because of their association in the eyes of other people with the Soviets. Okay, our cast today in 1915 is multiple. We have musicians, actresses, musicians, an opera singer, a ballerina, and we have within the imperial family itself, we have Nicholas and Alexandra, and another member of the family, Sandro Lichtenbergsky, as they called him, actually Alexander, the Duke of Leuchtenberg, who was a Romanov through his mother's side of the family. All right, we're up to the 7th/the 20th of February 1915. We're in Petrograd, although we'll be spending a little time in Tsarskaya Selo. Dmitri gives us his address in Petrograd, which we already know, Nevsky 41. It is -5 degrees, overcast, and windy. Another day that you don't want to be walking around outside very much. Okay, here we go. I got up around 11 o'clock and had coffee in bed. Maria came, of course. My throat operation has been scheduled for tomorrow at 11 o'clock. They say it's painful. We'll see. I didn't go out in the morning, but at 12 o'clock I took the train to Tsarskaya with Maria to have lunch with their majesties. We had to wait a little. Their majesties were extremely kind and gracious to me and to Maria. Nicky asked me to put myself down for adjutant's duty. They were really terribly touching. Then we stopped by to see Papa for a minute. Maria stayed behind with Bodya, and I took the 3:07 train home. I stopped by the club, then around 5 o'clock went to see Irina Radzianko. She had moved to the corner of Pushkarskaya and Kronverkskaya in the apartment building owned by the Russia Society. I didn't stay long. It was boring. I went home, changed, had dinner at the club, then at 10 o'clock went to Nikashidze's apartment, and here we have an illegible word, with Glesko. I'm sorry, not Glesko, Gulesko. There were lots of people. Sandro, the Mitusovs, Krupinski, Lipovskaya, her sister Princess Mikoladze, and others. Another illegible word was surprisingly nice and interesting. I stayed until 4 o'clock a.m. I didn't drink much, but I danced a lot. Oh, my friend, that's he's going to have an operation at 11 o'clock the next morning, and he's up till 4 a.m. All right, he didn't drink much, and I wonder if that's why, because of the operation. They'd probably ask him not to. Well, I don't know, I'm guessing. Okay, as for the operation, well, we will be finding out more about that. I want to, before we dive into the comments, Alexandra and Natasha, my Russian colleagues, made a note in the transcript they sent me of what Nicholas himself had said in his diary for that day, and he just wrote very tersely, lunch, Maria Pavlovna, Dmitri P., and Mordvinov on duty. Okay, so Mordvinov was the Flügel adjutant for that day. So, Nicholas was not by and large, a diarist in the sense that Dmitri was. He, if I recall correctly, because it's been a while since I read his diaries, he was always pretty terse. He's putting it rather formally, isn't he? Maria Pavlovna and Dmitri P. So I also wonder with Dmitri, I wonder if in general they were taught to keep diaries when they were children, and if they were taught to use identifiers with people's names, even if he wasn't calling them Maria Pavlovna and Dmitri Pavlovich, which I very much doubt he was still putting those into his diary, maybe, so that future readers would know exactly to whom he was referring, although he doesn't say Maria Pavlovna the younger. Okay, and Dmitri, let's see, so he's going to have this throat operation, and I'm not sure quite what it is, but we'll hear the details, some of them. And if any of you watching this are doctors or could run it by a doctor, maybe you can tell me what you think was going on with that. So he's very pleased with the reception they get in Tsarskaya Selo. As usual, he acts like he's a little surprised that people are receiving him warmly and being nice to him. He's very touched by the fact that Nicholas asked him to please sign up for the rotation to be a Flügel adjutant on duty, which he will indeed do. And there's no real tension at this time. Rasputin, of course, is not a topic that he's going to mention. Things are going all right, although maybe there's a little underlying tension. You tell me what you think, because Dmitri calling them their majesties, although he does refer to Nikki. And they haven't seen each other for a while. I mean, Dmitri's been away for a month, and it seems like, and they're kept waiting for a while. Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of distance there. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Dmitri's just a little surprised at the reception they get. Pleasantly surprised, of course, although he always seems to be, no matter what the situation is. Okay, then they drop in on Paul, and Maria decides to stay. Dmitri leaves, and specifically, Dmitri says she decides to stay with Bodya. And Maria was pretty enamored of her younger brother, her youngest brother, her half-brother. She considered him to be just an extraordinarily gifted young man, a poet, and insightful and intuitive. So, Dmitri doesn't have anything to say about why she decided to stay with Bodya, not with Papa, apparently, but specifically to hang out with Bodya. So that's interesting. Now he goes and visits Irina Petrovna Radzianko, who was a lady-in-waiting. I really don't know anything about her. She was a year older than Dmitri, so not really in his sweet spot, so to speak, but apparently someone, that he had contact with outside of court circles. She was also a cousin of Felix Yusupov's, Felix the Younger. She would ultimately end up getting married 3 times. And that's about all I know about her. He's bored, Apparently, he feels obliged to do that. I don't know, to go and see her. But he gets out of there pretty quickly. And it's interesting, she was staying in this very new building that actually, Dmitri says, the Russia Society, it was the Russian Insurance Society, and they built this building, this apartment building, in 1914. And they owned it, and they must have been quite nice apartments, because, otherwise she seems to have been so well connected. She was a lady-in-waiting, she was a cousin of the Yusupovs, so she could probably afford something really nice. Okay, Nikashidze, he's one of 2 Georgians who appear in this diary entry, and I just couldn't find anything out about him. I mean, I maybe could have, but it was apparently a big family of Georgian nobility, and there are so many of them from that time period that are listed in the Russian Wikipedia that I would have had to gone down through the whole list and look to see, who had a son. And I don't even know his first name, so yeah, I decided not to do that. He does not appear in any of Dmitri's later diary entries from after the revolution. Okay, and they're having a party there. Apparently he's very well connected in Petrograd, and there are all these guests. There's Jean Timofeyevich Gulescu, or in his native Romanian, Gulescu. He was a famous violinist. You can still find recordings of his on YouTube. And also conductor, and he was a favorite at court and also among the guards regiments as someone that you wanted to play at your events. But I think he was there as a guest. Then you had, so when Dmitri refers to Sandro, you always have to be careful, because sometimes, of course, it's Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich, other times it's the Duke of Leuchtenberg, as in this instance, and he was about 10 years older than Dmitri, but they were always kind of pals, and he does appear in other diary entries, including after the revolution. And interestingly, I had a note about him in my document saying that in 1917, after the revolution, or no, perhaps before, I don't know the month, he suggested to Nicholas that all the members of the imperial family should have to swear a second oath of allegiance to him, to Nicholas, because the family was really, Nicholas and Alexandra were pretty isolated, and the family were as a whole were very unhappy with them. And Dmitri, of course, had already been sent off to Persia, and so it's interesting that he, apparently he was not with the rest of the family and feeling that it was them against Nicholas, and he thought that Nicholas should demand that they swear this second oath. Anyway, moving on. Lydia Yakovlevna Lipkovskaya was an opera singer. She was 31 years old, and her sister, Dmitri doesn't give us the sister's name, but her sister, I'm guessing, she had, I think, two sisters. But I'm guessing the one that was here is probably the one who was a ballerina named Tatiana, and I think even associated with Kshesinska, who's not there, by the way. Apparently Dmitri was not interested in either one of them. I have included as the thumbnail a photograph of Lydia, the one who was an opera singer. But, I don't get the impression that he had any interest in them at all. Okay, Princess Mikoladze, I was unable to find, and Alexandra and Natasha were apparently also unable to find her without doing much more extensive research. So she just hasn't left much of a trace. And another Georgian. So a country woman of Nikashidze's invited to his party. And, this is a good place to interject that Russia was very much a multicultural country, empire. And that, Dmitri, when he went to British India in 1918, was kind of shocked at what he found there with the way the Indians were treated. Even wealthy, sophisticated people like, the Aga Khan or Ali Khan, he talks about, they're not allowed in the clubs, and Russia was much more sort of openly multicultural. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and unfortunately, But you would have found, people relatively had the right to pursue their own religions and languages. There was a big push to sort of force the Finns into using the Russian language instead of the Finnish language in schools, or instead of Swedish language. I don't know, but compared to other countries at that time, it was pretty tolerant overall. Okay. So what do we have next time? In 1915, in the next 1915 diary entry, we have the operation. That's going to be really the only topic of the day. And in 1936, we're going to start with well, we're not in 1935 anymore. We're going to start with January 1936. And the topic is a little paranoid in this long speech that Dmitri gives about, well, more defensive than paranoid, talking about how the young Russians are being accused of these sort of shady, dark conspiracies and deliberate provocations and that sort of thing. And he's going to try to counter that. Okay, so I hope to see you for both of those. Bye.